Hello, and welcome to business model number 7 out of 10, as described in my book called Secrets Below the Surface. And business models are super important for all of the different stakeholders that exist within a company. And in this, I describe stakeholders as employees of the company, shareholders of the company if they bought shares, and anybody who has ever lent any money to the company. So turns out that companies with good business models tend to provide their employees with more opportunities over the long term and better returns for people that have invested inside the company. As a matter of fact, one of the most important determinant of long-term stakeholder return has been proven to be the business model of the company, followed by industry growth and macro environment. Most people don't concentrate on the business models of the companies that they work at or that they invest in, and I always say that that is a big mistake. In this particular business model called Distractions Eliminator, the premise is that there is some kind of an external force that is on the company that, if not dealt with, could determine whether the company is going to be successful over the long term or going to be hurt over the long term. And some companies feel that they don't want to or don't need to deal with that external force, and other ones eliminate that external force or eliminate the distraction and concentrate all of their time and management energy on other things that add value to the company rather than worrying about this external force that they really can't do all that much about. So let's look at an example. Let's look at, this is a real life example that I had come across and watched over many years and watched how it unfolded. So we're gonna put, we have two companies. So we have company number 1 and we have company number 2. And they both are making micro motors, little motors that you would find, they move your windshield wipers when you turn them on. You might find them in a power drill, you might find them in a blender, and they both companies made those motors. And so all of the manufacturers of the products, like the windshield wiper manufacturer or the blender manufacturer, they have choices. They can either buy from company 1 or they can buy from company 2. And both company 1 and company 2 are exposed to raw material prices. That's one of their biggest inputs in making these micro motors. So let's draw a graph here, and this is actually what happened. And this is some of their biggest raw material ingredients is copper, Cu, and a specialized steel. And what was happening was copper and steel prices were relatively high on the graph, and I'm going to just draw a graph for the stock price. Stock prices of company 1 and company 2. And what ended up happening is that at some point, company 2 decided to employ the Distractions Eliminator business model, and they went to some large copper and large steel producers and they said, if we buy from you for the next 10 years, can we lock in some kind of a price for your copper and this specialized steel? And the suppliers said, sure, let's lock in, that would be great. And so they locked in a price that looks something like this. And so this is company 2 price. This one here. And company 1 said, well, we're not going to lock in a price because we think steel prices are going down, and we don't want to lock in a price because that is going to hurt us in the future, because we're going to be able to buy copper and steel at much lower prices going forward. And so their share prices started, let's say here, for both of them. my charts, but let's say that started around the same price. And what ended up happening over time was that company one was right. Copper and steel prices started to decline over time and got to a particular point. And so company one, who had not locked in any of the prices, they were benefiting because the price of their copper and their steel was going down, and so they were able to make more profit per motor that they sold, and they actually lowered the price of their motors so they could sell more motors. And their stock price actually started to climb up like this. Let's put that at around the same point. And company two, who had locked in a price, so they were not worried about copper and steel prices at the moment. They were then concentrating all of their management time and all of their management energy on producing the best motors and having the best features and making them smaller and having little variable speed things and stuff like that. And so they were concentrated on their product rather than the raw material price. These guys were spending a lot of time worrying about, is copper going up, and it went up yesterday and it went down tomorrow, and so they're spending a lot of energy and a lot of time worrying about the raw material price, while they're spending all of their time worrying about the features and long-term viability of their motor and trying to make it more useful for their customers. And so this went on like this for a while, and so you'd say, well, I would much rather, make this a little longer, I would much rather have invested here than invested here. True, for that period of time. But then what ended up happening is that copper and steel prices kind of floated around, maybe drifted up a little bit, and so this share price stalled. And this share price, because they were concentrating on the features of the product and trying to spoil their clients, they were actually able to sell more and more and more to reputable manufacturers, the Hondas of the world and the Makita and things like that. And they were selling their micro motors and spoiling the client and selling more and more and more and more. And so their share price was climbing slowly over time as they were getting to be even more embedded in some of the best manufacturers in the world. And then what ended up happening was that copper and steel prices, something happened in the world, there was a shock in the world, and copper and steel prices started to climb up. And wouldn't you know it, this company started to panic because they were not hedging anything, they were not locked in on anything. And so their raw material prices started to go up and up and up. And so their profit margins started to squeeze, and their clients, who were used to having price declines on their product every year, were all of a sudden asked to pay some premiums and things they didn't understand, and the stock price fell like that. This company, who had locked in the prices, they didn't care so much that the copper and steel prices were going up. Just kept concentrating on the features of the product, and they made their motors better and better and better and better, and their stock price continued to climb and climb and climb and climb. And so this is actually a real life example. Now, a couple of things I just want to mention with this. If over here, this company decided to lock in the price at some price level with their suppliers. If you were to average the price over time, then you probably would have found that the average price for copper and steel over that whole period would have been something like this. Okay? Lower than what the company locked in at. But the thing is that it didn't really matter all that much because it allowed them to eliminate the distraction of a huge input into the profitability of their product so that they can concentrate on making it better and better and better and better. Even if over the long term they had to pay a little bit more for copper and steel, the benefit of them being able to concentrate all of their time and energy on the features of the product far, far outweighed any kind of a cost savings that may potentially have happened over time. And so you can see what happened here. This company actually almost went bankrupt during this period, as a matter of fact. They had to lay off a bunch of employees, and they had to revamp, and they had to close factories, and they had to... So if you're a stakeholder, you either lent money to, or you're actually an employee of the company, it's like, which of these two companies would you rather have been working for? And so that's an example of distractions eliminator business model. And so there's a bunch of applications of this around the globe that I've seen that have worked really, really well. And so as an example, here we see components manufacturer. That's a good example when you have raw material prices and you're making something that is a product that's going into something else, and you're some kind of a component manufacturer. This is a good time to think about distractions eliminator. There, one in specific that is actually mentioned in the book, there's a company called Shinitsu out of Japan, and they have a US branch, and the US branch makes PVC products, or they used to. This is going back a few years. They made PVC products, and they decided they were in a very volatile market for making PVC. There's a couple of ways you can make PVC, and the raw material prices go like this. And so you can imagine that some people are competitive one day and not competitive the other, and it was very, very volatile. So they locked in their prices, and again, they locked in probably higher than maybe had they not locked in and calculated an average over 10 years, but they locked in their prices, and they started making the best quality PVC that they possibly could. Then they started to go up the value chain, and they didn't just make PVC, they started making PVC siding and PVC pipes and PVC components for other things. And so they were able to bring the company to a level where they were able to add value to the entire chain, because they eliminated the distraction of the raw material price. Brilliant company, brilliant investment over time. Other examples that you can find out there, banks. Now, some banks do this very well, and some banks don't do this very well, but banks, if you think about it, they ask you for deposits, and they do that in a few ways. You put money into a savings or checking account, or you buy one of their investment that they have, like a GIC, for example. And so you give the money to the bank, and you have it. You can take your money out of your checking account tomorrow if you like, or if you have a GIC, it might be for a year, or it might be for 6 months, but it's for a relatively short period of time. Then the bank takes that money, turns around, and it lends it out to people who are starting businesses, or they need a mortgage, and it lends it out for sometimes 3 years, 5 years, etc., etc. So they get their raw material with short-term pricing, and then they give it back out with long-term pricing. So if interest rates were to go up and you demanded more, if you were going to buy a GIC from them, for example, if you wanted to have a higher rate, it would cost the bank more. And so the price of their raw material could go up past the point of what they lent it out for the next 3 to 5 years. Well, that could bankrupt them. No pun intended, but that could bankrupt them. And so what they do is they have departments that will match the interest rate sensitivity of their raw materials and the loan that they have for 3 to 5 years. So if that were to happen, then they have all kinds of derivatives and things in place to eliminate that distraction. If that distraction is eliminated, they can go back to customer-facing operations and trying to sell you this and sell you that and fee you to death, as we all complain the banks do. But they can concentrate on their core business and making the businesses more and more profitable without the distraction of worrying about where interest rates are going to go, because that's not what's going to determine how strong the business is going to be over the long term. Insurance companies, kind of the same, kind of do similar things. So that's a distractions eliminator. Here's an example. Like I said, it doesn't, just because two companies look like they're doing exactly the same thing, it does not mean that they're doing the same thing at all. And so keep that in mind. And how to detect a company like this, if you work for it or if you're doing an investigation on whether you want to invest in the company. So there's usually long-term purchase agreements that have been put in place. They might not tell you all of the stipulations that are in these agreements, but there's usually long-term purchase agreements that have been put in place. And then a lot of times, because they have this, they're able to enter into long-term sales agreements for their product as well. So if you are a very successful car manufacturer, like a Honda or Toyota, and you say, well, I would really like it if you were to sell me these motors for the next 5 years, because that's how long the model cycle is for this next Honda Accord. You have to sell me these motors for the next 5 years at this same price, then I would enter that agreement with you. Well, if you are controlling your input as best you can entertain entering a long-term sales agreement for your product as well. So two things that a lot of times exist in these kinds of companies: long-term purchase agreements for raw materials and long-term sales agreements as well. There's way more I could tell you about distractions eliminator, but think about it in other applications in your life. There's lots of different ways that you already are doing this in your life. If you buy health insurance when you travel, you're doing it. You're eliminating that distraction so you can go and have a great time, right? So distractions eliminator, one of the business models that are listed inside this book, Secrets Below the Surface. I invite you to take a look at the book, and I invite you to look at the other video series of the other 9 models as well. Thank you very much for listening today, and hope you have a great day.